Whether you consider it the dawn of a new era or a death knell for progress, power has shifted in Washington, D.C. This morning, a roundtable of our lawmakers on their priorities for the future. Today is Sunday, November 14, 2010, and this is Flashpoint. All right, welcome to Flashpoint. Election day is behind us. We're slowly moving past the X's and O's of what happened in this election cycle, and now we can turn our attention to the real matter at hand, and that is the new lineup of faces, the alliances, and the majorities in state houses all over the country, and certainly in Washington, D.C. And this morning, I think we've got a real treat in store. As we move from a Capitol Hill controlled by Democrats, we head into one now much more influenced by Republicans, but also by a pretty angry electorate who sent the next edition of Congress to D.C. with a set of marching orders that some fear isn't very realistic given the size of the deficit. Will the first steps of the new Congress be taken decisively and with a sense of firm purpose, or will they step gingerly into some very tricky circumstances? This morning, we're convening a meeting of members of the Detroit area delegation. Two Republicans are here. Both Thad McCotter and Candace Miller had a pretty ho-hum election night, which was fine with both of them, each being sent back to the nation's capital by wide margins, riding that wave of GOP euphoria. On the other side of the table, two Democrats who have to wonder what awaits them. Gary Peters survived the Republican onslaught to return to his seat, and Hansen Clarke is that rare breed who knocked off an incumbent from his own party, taking out Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick and becoming a new voice for Detroit in D.C. We'll let the two sides square up everything from health care to tax cuts, where we're headed in America in 2011. It's this morning on Flashpoint. Always feels like a bit of a trick for us to be able to put together a gathering of Michigan congressional representatives. It is not easy to get four very packed schedules to find a common opening, but Eureka, we've done it just ahead of the congressional class of 2008, heading back to D.C. to wrap things up before convening the class of 2010, which of course comes with quite a few changes in both chambers. Well, let's welcome Republican Congresswoman Candace Miller back with us from the 10th District. Next to her, Congressman Thad McCotter from the 11th District. And over on the Democratic side of the table, Gary Peters is here from the 9th District. And Hansen Clarke, yes, your first trip back to Congress will be coming up here, or I shouldn't say back, but to Congress coming up here from the 13th District. Congratulations, first off. Thank you. And in fact, I know you're leaving later today to start going through the orientation process. Right. Congresswoman Miller, let me start with you. I always have a suspicion that the winners of any election sometimes misread the mandate, the message that voters have sent them there. Do you suppose voters were telling us that they really prefer the Republican way of doing things, or are they telling us that no, we just need something different from what we're seeing given the way the economy's been going and many other issues? You
know, I would agree that it is really sometimes the winners, the victors really do misread what the mandate is. I think President Obama misread his mandate, and you know, there was so much goodwill toward him and hopeful for change, etc., and then the Democratic majority and the president began to govern, and I think the people then rejected that kind of governance with the stimulus, the cap and trade, obviously Obamacare, etc. The Republicans, I'm very hopeful, and I do believe this, understand that Congress's poll numbers are still very low, and I think people have now given us the ball. We better not fumble it again. Or, you know, you could end up with a third party. They're not going to know whether they can trust the Democrats or Republicans or what's going to happen. Yeah. So I think there is a huge commitment, certainly on the part, the face of our party now, who is Speaker-elect John Boehner, and I've had an opportunity to meet and to talk to so many of the new freshman members who are coming in on our side of the aisle. This is a large group of people who are very reform-minded. They have their own ideas.
It's an interesting way of putting it, the way you started there. In fact, Congressman McCotter, some would suggest that the Obama administration has actually done exactly what they said they were going to do, that their bigger problem was not managing the message better in explaining that, look, we've managed to get the exact agenda through that we promised you we would get through, chief among them health care reform.
Well, there was a period of time after the 2006 elections where the Republicans were put into a minority, where we heard many on our side say the same thing. And I would encourage my Democratic friends not to make the mistake that the Republicans did at that point in time. It's not a question of massaging a message. It's a question of, did you implement what you said you were going to do, and is that what you in fact promised us? I would argue that the late majorities of both parties went way too far in a very tumultuous time, and that's why 2010 became a check and balance election, much like 2006. The question for Republicans, as you rightly point out, is do you understand that this was an affirmation by the people of what they don't like, as opposed to suddenly a reaffirmation of the Republican Party? Because as Rasmussen polling and every polling shows, neither party is held in high regard. And so I would encourage both sides to realize that right about now, it's time to actually get some things done for people who are suffering.
Well, Congressman Peters, do you feel like you're going back having been smacked with a stick a little bit, or is it, you know, all politics is local? For you, it really boils down to your district's been happy with what you're doing, and so you go back and do the same thing.
Well, and I want to get back to the message, which I think that we should all take from this, at least what I heard out on the campaign trail over and over again, is that people wanted both Democrats and Republicans to work together. And it's about stop the partisan bickering and really try to move more to the center to be practical problem solvers. We have significant problems that we're facing in this country, significant challenges, and no one party has a monopoly of ideas, and we've got to be able to come together. And I think most voters, certainly in Oakland County, where I'm from, want people to govern from the center, and they are very frustrated when you have a party that puts on ideological blinders, whether it's to the left or it's to the right, and then aren't willing to compromise and come together. And instead of focusing first, and it's been my frustration in Congress as well in my first 2 years, is that there tends to be let's focus on where our differences are first and not go anywhere, as opposed to let's focus on what we have in common first and then build from that. And I think that's what the American people are saying. Okay, now we have divided government. Republicans have to come forward with ideas. Democrats have ideas. Now work together.
And I do want to spend some time on where that governance should be coming from, but let me let you quickly jump in, Congressman-elect Clarke, because it seems to me that your marching orders may be a little bit complicated. And are you reading that people were really sending you to Washington based on your ideas, or did you beat an incumbent in Carolyn Sheets Kilpatrick who was very unpopular and people were mostly maybe fatigued with the Kilpatrick family?
You know, for me, the message was really clear. People are upset because they're out of work, they're in debt, and they see Congress spending all of their tax dollars bailing out the banks that foreclose on their neighbors, destroying their own home values, and bailing out companies like AIG and other insurance companies that overcharge safe drivers in Metro Detroit with unfairly high insurance rates. And they wanted their money spent on them directly, not on things that cost a lot of money, but better job training, stronger schools, providing more capital to small businesses who are ready to expand and hire people right now. But here's the most important thing I found from employers, and that was this. There are many companies that are willing to invest right now in Metro Detroit, but they won't because of the image of the city. They feel that they have to play politics to do business in Metro Detroit. So that's why I believe the voters chose me, because they want me to lead by example, to represent them with integrity, and I believe that's the best way to attract business and jobs back to the region.
Fair enough. Let's start then with how the government has been spending its money and the idea of how we best stimulate the economy. Still a great deal of debate over stimulus package, the way that we managed to bail out the financial institutions. And in Michigan, I think you have to lump in there what, you know, if you're going to be upset about one kind of bailout, and then how do you feel about the auto bailout? But let's talk about the way that the government has approached spending money to get things moving.
Well, I do think that that was certainly a message that I heard, and I think that that was so generally across the entire nation. People finally said, look, this federal spending is out of control. You know, the numbers are just mind-boggling. They couldn't even get their mind around the deficits, the amount of deficits that we are having. And I think one of the things you're going to find with the Republicans, certainly I'm going to feel this way, every time I have to vote for spending now, I sort of give it the 40-cent rule. And I say that because we have to borrow 40 cents for every dollar we are spending. And we're borrowing it from countries that we probably don't want to be having as our bankers. So I think that that really was a big message that I got, and I do think that you're going to see now the Republican majority trying to change the culture of Washington from what has been a culture of spending really out of control. The Republicans, we had our own problems when we were there, but what has happened in the last 2 years is beyond anybody's imagination.
Was the money that the government invested, though, in Chrysler and General Motors money well spent?
I do think, now here I am playing for the home team, and I must say in full transparency, a lot of people said that that money, you know, wasn't going to be able to be paid back, et cetera. We already see, and you know, we have this quaint idea that pay the money back, and we already see General Motors is trying to pay the money back, and I think they will. And I think long term, this is the thing, in Michigan, we are also painfully aware of the economic challenges we have with the transformation of the auto industry, and I think my feeling is, the truth is, if that hadn't happened for General Motors or Chrysler, General Motors would have had a chaotic bankruptcy. Chrysler probably would have been liquidated, and as bad as it is in Michigan, what would have happened would have been unimaginable.
A sticky one for conservatives and Republicans, I think, especially from Michigan. Money well spent, Congressman McCotter?
Well, it's not particularly difficult if one recognizes the distinctions between the two. First, as Candace pointed out, the auto companies went into bankruptcy. They were put into a prepackaged bankruptcy. It was very painful for a lot of working people here in Michigan. I didn't see the same thing done to a single Wall Street firm that caused the financial crash.
Fair enough.
The money that the auto industry had tried to get was money that was originally set aside for low-interest loans to help fund a mandate, a larger mandate that was stuck on them in the first place. That was voted down by the people like Shelby and Corker in the Senate. But the TARP money, the question was for us then, does it all go to Wall Street? Does it all go to their bonuses? Or do we actually get some to keep a manufacturing base here in the United States? So to me, it's a very simple equation. The need to have a manufacturing base, the need to represent this area and not allow them to become victims of the financial crisis that they didn't cause was quite simply pretty clear to me. It wasn't as clear to a lot of people, some on either side of the aisle, that didn't like the auto industry. But when you look at this in the overall picture, we've had historic precedents where Chrysler had help from the federal government in the 70s and got through it, paid it back with interest. This will be paid back a whole lot faster than AIG is ever going to get paid back.
I will let Congressman Peters weigh in on the same subject. We continue. This is Flashpoint. We've convened a meeting of the Michigan Congressional Delegation, and we'll continue live on Local 4 right after this.